That's that. What's up, Another Dimension? How are you? Do you have any questions that you've been very curious about that you would like to know? Because now's the time. Now's the time. When are we going to do that collab of ours? Hi, welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Okay, so like I said, if you have questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I'll work off that. Okay, no questions for now. Otherwise, I'm just gonna kind of talk about what I've been doing. So, over the last couple of months, I've been working on a few projects. Okay, and I don't know if I want to disclose the names of those yet, but I have two albums in the works, 8 songs each, and I'm planning on dropping those next year, but early next year, and spacing those out so that I can start to work on a big project, which is releasing a song a week. And I got my inspiration for that from Russ. The idea that we're in an age where everyone's producing music, everyone's producing content, so uh, why not just release as often as possible? So that's what I want to attempt to do is just release a bunch of content and hopefully, hello, hi mom. I just want to release a bunch of content and hopefully improve while I'm doing so. And so the idea is make 2 songs a week, right? So make like fully published, fully mastered. I'm gonna like mix through it, write out the lyrics, polish beats. Probably make more than 2 beats a week, but make 2 solid bangers, uh, even if they're low key, a week, and then pick my favorite out of those, and that's what I would publish, weekly. But I would be ahead of schedule, so that everything would just fall into line slowly, right after another. And we're in an age where there's just so many ideas and outlets, and hip hop is really based off of mashups. So there's just so many things that I could do with music. There's so many outlets that I could choose to take for music videos. There's free loops online. I can choose to do a dance video and loop it. There's so much I could experiment with. Later, another dimension. Later. I appreciate your support. So the idea of publishing weekly would be cool because I'd be able to experiment with so many different ideas. Whatever comes up, I'd be able to experiment with that. If I wanted to do a collaboration with someone, I'd be able to experiment with that. And I wouldn't have to be too worried because I'd be able to publish something else right away, right after that. So that's why I'm mostly considering that. But like I was saying, I have 2 projects. I'm stacking up. That way I will have time to do that. So that I'll have time, like, leeway, because I don't want to pressure myself where I have to publish every week. One week some life thing might happen, so I want like a couple months of advance. So I've created some projects. One of them, I'll let you know some details. One of them is more like jazzy uh and dancey, so it's got a lot of like dance hits on it, and like it's got that oops, ats, oops, ats, oops, ats, oops, ats kind of flow. Yeah, and it also has like some jazz music on it, so it's really intellectual stuff, and it talks about like what I'm seeing in the world and how that's based in gospel, and how like very humanistic aspects of just being a human, and it's all based around this jazz and this like dance kind of album. And uh, what's funny though is I made that at the same time that I was making this rock album, uh, which is this second album that I was producing together. It's like hip hop and rock and jazzy like kind of vibes, but mostly like rock and hip hop. Obviously, I'm rapping and I'm singing, and I'm still discovering my singing voice, but I was making these dance bangers out of the blue, and that happens to me every time I produce. Like I sit down to produce one type of album. I'll sit down and I'll say I'm just gonna produce like trap. And sometimes I can do that. Sometimes, like, especially if I sit down for like one beat, I was like, this is gonna be a trap beat, sure. But when I'm like trying to produce an album, it normally occurs that I'll be working on something, and then the next day it's a dance beat, and then the next day it's a jazz beat, and then the next day it's a rock beat, and maybe that's like a bit of my scattered brain, and I'm okay with that because the outcome is normally a nice collective, and people like collective, people like uniqueness and a bunch of different stuff. Hey, thank you very much, Mom. Shout out to my mom. Yeah, so these albums, I guess I'll share in more in depth. One of these albums is really about uh, what I saw in the world. Recently, I took a trip to California, and it wasn't just in California, it was through Colorado and then through Utah and, all these different places. And what I saw was like life is built systematically so that the only reason we have like nectar, so to speak, nectar being like sustenance and pleasure and luxury, the only reason we have nectar is because we plant it like we reap it in rows, and it, honestly, it's very catacomb like. It's very honeycomb like. It's very much like a garden. That's capitalism is because when you enter into a garden, you see a bee and that little bee's buzzing around, and it's like, what am I gonna go do? And the flowers, they know what they're doing, so they say, hey, come by here, buy one get one free. So the bee goes and gets their pollen, and he collects their pollen, and then he brings it back to the hive. But in doing so, he's spreading the seed. So all that is just to say that the world is set up in a way that it's like a give and take, like it's an exchange. But what humans have done is they've taken these massive spaces of dead land, wasteland, and they've converted it into capitalistic mechanisms in order to mass produce whatever they want. So we have t-shirts galore. We have honey in jars you could just go buy at the store. Everything, everything, everything. So that really made me think, like, wow, like there's no life on this earth unless we bring it. There's no life unless we bring the materials to make it anymore. And I'm a firm believer that ever since the flood, the world has just been, a wasteland. It used to be an oasis in the Garden of Eden, but it's just been complete wasteland. So that's what one album is about, and more deeply is talking about that philosophically, and like into my mental is talking about like you know, uh, dealing with like depression and anxiety and things like that, but then overcoming it with Christ. So it's like the wasteland, like the dead of the earth, the desert of the earth, the Mojave Desert of the earth is like, your depression. Uh, but then you overcome it with Christ, or you overcome it with sustenance, good things. So that's interesting. And then another one of my albums, uh, parallel to that one that I was making at the same time, is talking about uh, like hope, people experience, but also like the negativity of Earth, like how the music industry is corrupt with evil and like Satanism and like all this garbage. And like all our leaders and all our genuine geniuses of the world are, uh, bribed to go down negative directions. But like again, the bright side is just that we have Christ, that we have a hope. So both albums kind of talk about like negative aspects of the world that we're living in, negative things that we deal with, but then talk about how we can overcome those negative things. So I'm pretty excited about that. That, and I do have an EP coming out as well. And that EP is touching more on my what I deal with mentally, and like how I coexist with myself, and how I cope with that. So, if there's any parallel to be made between the three albums, it's that there's a lot of negativity within this world. There's a lot of negativity within life, but we have methods of overcoming it. We have a reasonable way to overcome that negativity. So, one final point I'd like to touch on for today, and that is that I'm going to be live streaming every day for as long as I want to, and I'm going to be just rambling, taking questions, connecting with whoever's listening to my music, whoever wants to connect with me. And I'm going to talk about my music, what's going on in the background. I want this to be free. A lot of people would put this on Patreon. A lot of people would do that kind of thing. And I'm going to have a Patreon. I'm going to do that. But I want to have my updates available for everybody who's interested in my music because that's a part of the music to me. My music has always been very personal. I made that decision early on with my music, and I feel as though this is a way that I'm able to connect with the people who care. So, shout out my mom because she gave me this idea. And if anybody is interested in doing this in the future, then I will continue to be here at 7 p.m. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I'm going to end the stream now.